Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Live Wrap Up. Joe Samaniego here, along with Alex Anderson from the Gay Racing Podcast, Ben Schneider, Kobe Lambeth from the Podium Finish. A big thank you to our Patreon subscribers, calling the show Mark, Robin, and David for making this weekend possible at Portland International Raceway. And for everyone watching, if you enjoyed what we did at Portland and you want to see more of us at the track, invest in the Grid Network. We would be more than happy to send our team to tracks across the country. If we could do globally, even better. And of course, if you want to contribute to a particular on-air person, member of the Grid Network team, through the super chat, or buy me a coffee, we'll display your name and the person will thank you on the air. And of course, the money would go to that person. What a race weekend. Very excited. We encourage everyone, check out the Portland 2003 playlist for more coverage. We'll be uploading the Sunday wrap-up. But Kobe, the championship, that is apparently all done for.
Yeah, championship all done for. The 2023 NTT IndyCar Series championship all wrapped up with Alex Palou, who led 69 laps yesterday and ended up winning the Bitnow.com Grand Prix of Portland. Felix Rosenqvist got second place after a controversial caution that set up the last sprint to finish. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But Palou, what a performance, what a day, what a drive. Pulled away from everyone, and he was on a totally different level. Joe, starting with you, as we all know, you were on site at Portland National Raceway all weekend. From your perspective, did Palou do his best Scott Dixon-like performance, essentially on the master himself, Scott Dixon?
That's what it appeared from my vantage point, because the start of the race, he got up to third place early on. Then it was just a matter of staying up front. But the big thing he was talking about in the press conference after the race, he didn't just want to go out there follow Scott Dixon. He didn't just want to go out there point race. He wanted to win. Chip Ganassi, before the race, he told Chip Ganassi, we're going to win this. Okay, great. That would be great if you could do that. And guess what Alex Palou did? He went out there. He won it. He took control of this race very early. Staying out longer on that first stint, I think, was a big benefit. He just really put on a master performance. And it just seemed like once he was in the clean air, in the lead, it was game over for everyone. Alex Palou taking that big win and wrapping up the championship early. Big day for him, the Chip Ganassi team. And what's really crazy, Chip Ganassi Racing, to think about this, we're 16 races in, 8 wins for that team with Ericsson, Dixon, and Palou. What an effort by that team overall.
Yeah, for sure. And something with Scott Dixon and Alex Palou that really stands out to me is how Chip Ganassi Racing, they finally have someone to pair with Scott Dixon like they had in the early 2000s. At one point, they had Dan Weldon in the 10, then they had Dario Franchitti in the 10, and they just haven't had that since Franchitti had to leave. And I think that's a huge beneficiary for Chip Ganassi Racing, having 2 strong cars being contenders every week. And this year, past few years even, they've had 3 with Ericsson as well. But yeah, all around, very cool for Chip Ganassi Racing to wrap up another title.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. I think absolutely Palou, Scott Dixon, if you will. But I also think race control kind of anti-Dixon, Scott Dixon, with what happened to him in the final caution. I won't go too far into that because I know we're going to get into that here in just a moment. But that kind of left a sour taste in my mouth and I think kind of ruined what I think was shaping up to be a pretty solid race with the different strategy aspects that we had going on. And then race control did what they've done so many times before, but I'll hold my tongue until we get to that part of the show here.
Yeah, Ben, we'll save that for later. But looking at Alex Palou, it's been an incredible season that he's had. And I know in the NBC Sports booth, I don't remember who it was either James Hinchcliffe or Townsend Bell, but I think it was James Hinchcliffe talked about how Alex Palou, when he came to Chip Ganassi Racing, he was a really quiet driver who just sat back and listened. In order to develop his skills as a driver and learn how to handle these high pressure moments of racing for a championship. They said he was basically a sponge, just absorbing all this information, using Scott Dixon and Jimmy Johnson as mentors. And now he's used all those lessons that he's learned in the last couple of years to reach this point to become a 2-time NTT IndyCar Series champion. Palou is still a very young driver, and he's far from being in the prime of his career. And if Alex Palou is this strong right now, if he stays in IndyCar for the foreseeable future, there's no telling how many championships this guy could end up winning if he stays with Chip Ganassi Racing long term. Keep this same group together, the chemistry as strong as it's ever been and continues to remain strong, sky's the limit for Alex Palou and Chip Ganassi Racing. Who knows? He might even get some opportunities to go to the pinnacle of motorsports, depending on how things shape up in this situation. But Palou, despite the controversial caution, great job. Tip my hat to him. A really strong race and great performance. But looking at another thing that happened from the race and entering this event, Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing saw the potential podium finish for Graham Rahal after taking pole position. Race got away from Graham once Palou did the undercut in that first stint. The RLO cars didn't have a great day after starting the weekend off so strong. Christian Lundgaard, he was fastest in practice, and Yuri Vips, both of them started towards the midfield. Lundgaard ended up finishing 11th, well for Graham Rahal, and Vips 18th in his series debut. Alex, is this a minor setback for RLO because of the changing track conditions? Because we know they entered the race very confident in their strategy and speed.
Now, I don't really know if it's a setback for them because, like we've been talking about, they were awful at the start of the year. So I think they should be pretty proud of how they handled this race. I know Graham Rahal is probably one of the favorites to win this race, and it didn't quite work out. But the fact that they have speed again, that's something they should be really proud of and really build on for 2024. And I don't think they should really get too upset about things not working out towards the end of this year. Because this year, honestly, you could have thrown away the first half of it. But I don't know. I think Christian Lundgaard had a good recovery in this race. Still finished 11th. I mean, finished ahead of Rahal. And Yuri Vips had a clean 18th place finish. So I think overall, I don't think there's anything to be too upset about for RLL with this race. I think they should just keep building for next year.
Yeah, I think Graham Rahal obviously is going to be a little bit disappointed when you start up front like that and then only have a 12th place finish to show for it. Unlike the last time he did at the IMS Road Course, coming so close to a win, finishing second behind Scott Dixon there. At 12th is certainly going to be disappointing for him. But I think, again, like Alex was saying, when you look at where RLL was at the start of this year, when you look at where they were at the Indianapolis 500, the fact that the cars have speed again is a massive win. Now it's just a matter of trying to figure out how to use that speed to convert it into strong finishes. It's got to be disappointing not to even have one car in the top 10 there, but I think they have a very solid driver lineup. We'll see what happens going into 2024. I think they've got nothing but good things to build upon, and we weren't able to say that at the start of the year. I think they're in a much better position now as we approach the end of the season than they were at the start of it, and that's a massive win for this team.
100% agree with both of you. That team is really much improved, looking really great, and really, when it comes to putting together a good race, yeah, we know Christian Lundgaard got the win. We know Graham Rahal got second place earlier this year. Was really excited about this race. But I think this is where it shows where Ganassi, some of those other teams, when it comes to race strategies, setups, they're just still a little bit ahead. But Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan, they have to look at this weekend as what can we learn, what we could do better. Because at the end, I thought they were really stellar. Graham Rahal was looking pretty good while he was leading up until we had the pit stops. Then it just seemed like it all fell apart. But overall, it didn't ended up with like poor results here and there. Frustrating results, I would say yes. When you're up in the pole and you're not finishing the top 10, that's going to hurt. But compared to where they were before, where this is a disappointment, that's a good indicator. And one of the things I remember Graham Rahal in the press conference, he said when he's struggling with the car because the power, there's too much power, that's a good sign. In the first half of the year, he'll be pushing that car and he felt like it was just too easy to drive. That's when they were slow. Now the cars are getting faster. That team is going the right way. I think they have to look at Perlin as a plus. We got a pole for Graham Rahal. We led laps there. Now let's just work on our strategy game. With goodness sake, with that repave, that could be a really interesting race for everybody and Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan.
Yeah, Joe, it's going to be interesting to see the repave next week and how that goes on. Maybe it opens the door up for a lot more teams to be in contention. And with the speed Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan racing that's shown in the second half of the season, it would not surprise me if we see one of their drivers making some noise in the IndyCar season finale. But totally agree with you, considering how this season starts. This entire organization has to be extremely pleased with how it looks like they're going to end the year with a lot of momentum headed into the 2024 season. And getting back to the most controversial moment of the race, this occurred when Agustin Canapino spun off turns 10 and 11. This is the quick left-right after the backstretch, and the car stalled and could not continue. However, race control displayed the caution after Felix Rosenqvist completed his stop. This allowed Rosenqvist to get an advantage of not losing many positions and getting in between Scott Dixon and Alex Palou. Several drivers were not happy at all with the call and felt like an unfair advantage was given. We know IndyCar has done this multiple times before, trying not to have the caution ruin a team's race. But some drivers have actually said that when they do this, it actually does ruin a team's race. So it has the opposite effect of what IndyCar intends. And we know as soon as the caution comes out, the pits close until the fill is packed up. So Rosenqvist would have gone from a podium finish to deep in the pack. Starting with you on this one, Ben, does IndyCar need to change its policy of holding the caution to allow others to pit? And should this be resolved before next season?
Yes. And Kobe, what did you just say? What are these things called here, these yellow flags? They're called cautions. Either something is a caution or it's not. You can't just say, oh, well, obviously this is a safety hazard, but let's trust our drivers to get through the next lap or lap and a half cleanly so we can get through the pit cycle and not disadvantage everybody, and we'll trust that they can do that, and then we'll throw a caution after. You can't do that. This, to me, is worse than how the end of the Indianapolis 500 was handled, and anybody that watched that wrap-up show knows how I feel about the multiple red flags to try to guarantee a green flag finish there. Alex, I'm sorry. I know you're a big Joseph Newgarden fan. Credit to your guy. He totally deserved the win. I'm not taking anything away from him. It's how race control handled the finish of that race that I have a problem with. But this is an even bigger problem for me. Either something is a safety hazard that warrants the yellow flag to come out, or it doesn't. That's part of why I'm so opposed to the stage cautions in NASCAR as well, because it's right there in the name. You throw a yellow flag out when a caution is necessary, when it's necessary to slow everybody down because there's a hazard on the track, and that was clearly the case here. But race controls, they've done so many times before, decided, well, let's make sure Felix can get into the pits first, and then we'll throw a caution out, and everybody will be happy afterwards. Even though Scott Dixon clearly wasn't happy, he was furious, and good for him. He should have been furious, because even though they try to neutralize it, they try to make sure nobody gets advantage or disadvantage, it's inevitable that either whatever you do, it's going to happen when a caution comes out on the track, whether you hold it for a lap or not. That's just how racing goes sometimes. So you might as well just throw the caution when it's absolutely necessary at the very beginning, rather than holding it back to try to make sure everybody can get through the pit cycle. But you still have drivers that are going to benefit from it or not benefit from it either way. So that this is absolutely something that needs to be looked at going into 2024 and beyond, because, again, it's there in the name. A caution is necessary or it's not. There's no gray area there. It was clear the 78 was stalled, was not going to get restarted. You've got to throw a caution immediately because that's a safety hazard, and it's irresponsible to hold it for a lap just so we can get through the pit cycle. It's absolutely ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. I know a lot of drivers were really upset about how that was handled, and the big thing, during that race, we were feeling little bits of rain, little sprinkles here and there, not enough to switch over to the wet tires, not enough of concern. But just in the event, if something happened and we saw a driver lose control and slide into Canapino, we would have a bigger, worse accident, and we'll be all critical of race control not throwing the caution soon enough. This opens a can of worms for IndyCar, because I get it. They don't want to see a team up front have the race absolutely ruined. But you just essentially ruined what could have been a duel between Scott Dixon and Alex Palou. At the end of the race, we saw Agustin Canapino. He finished behind Will Power. What if that caution was thrown faster? Would he still finish ahead of Will Power? Would he not finish ahead of Will Power? Just waiting essentially ruined his race. At the end, I don't understand this philosophy of we don't want to ruin the leaders or the front runners' race because of a caution. If this was under wet conditions and Canapino spun, caution immediately because we know it's wet conditions. Dry conditions, okay, we're going to wait till Felix Rosenqvist and some others make their pit stops. I just don't agree with that philosophy at all. This is part of racing. This is why they call it the danger zone in NBC. If you're out there too long and the caution comes out, your race is ruined. That's part of racing. I just don't understand this philosophy. Scott Dixon mentioned it in the press conference, and he wasn't happy about it at all.
Well, Scott Dixon shouldn't be happy about it because he lost a position to Felix Rosenqvist, who essentially got a free pit stop and didn't know any sort of strategy or anything. He was just he just pit when this car was sitting there, and then he got to go for a free pit stop and then got second place for free. And it's ridiculous. The question is, should this be resolved before next season? This should have been resolved several seasons ago. This was a problem last year and the year before, and this is still just an weird, unwritten rule that IndyCar has, and I don't get it because you're hurting your own product, you're manipulating your own race, and you're putting your drivers at risk. I don't get it. It makes no sense. And for me, this really killed the race for me because this race for me wasn't exactly enjoyable in the first place. The strategy wasn't really doing it for me. But then when this happened and other stuff we're gonna talk about later just came up, it's like you're ruining the fan experience. You're ruining the experience for the drivers. I don't. It's ridiculous and need to be changed a long time ago.
I agree with you. And one of the things we seem to hear this quite a bit from the race car drivers, IndyCar doing IndyCar things. That was something we've heard Rossi said in the past. Scott Dixon said that. Why is race control still, oh, we want to ensure we don't ruin somebody's race? Well, let's just let the caution wait until hopefully everyone makes their pit stops. It just doesn't make sense. And like you said, it ruins the experience for the drivers, the fans. I just don't understand this philosophy.
And Joe, if I can just follow up with one more thing here. They didn't even try to hide it. As soon as Felix got to the pit exit, that was the exact moment that the caution lights came on. And you want to talk about getting through the pit cycle, he didn't have to do an outlap. You got the exact moment he left the pits, that was when the caution lights came on. So it doesn't, you want to say you get through the pit cycle and make sure everything's neutral there. I just, it's an advantage for him, and it's clearly a disadvantage for Scott Dixon, and that's why he was so upset. So you didn't even get through the entire cycle because in-laps and out-laps exist, and he got the benefit of not having to do an outlap on cold tires.
Yeah, for sure. I'm in full agreement with all of you guys. It doesn't make sense why IndyCar continues to do this, as I already said. While their intention is not to ruin anyone's race, they still end up ruining drivers' races by doing this. Like you were saying, Ben, it's a caution or it's not. And I don't understand how they always say, be like, oh, the car is in an unsafe position. We really need to hold the caution until everyone's pit so we don't ruin the race. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And I think that this is something that needs to be resolved before the 2024 season. Like you're saying, Joe, is racing. These things happen. If there's a crash, someone stalled on track and you haven't pitted yet, unfortunately, that's a circumstance and you just have to deal with it. So if you haven't pitted yet, that sucks for you, but you're gonna have to come and pit under caution, and then you have to fall to the back of the pack. And we talked about several drivers who are unhappy with the call. Do you guys see Pato Award's interview after the race? Pato was absolutely fired up. Not just about this, but other things as well. I also wanted to bring up the point. Pato was very frustrated with the lap cars because, unlike Formula One, they don't have the blue flags. In IndyCar, where make the lap car pull away. And then you also have certain times on the restart, you have lap cars starting up there in between the leaders, which is also frustrating for them. So I'm wondering, how do you guys feel about Pato's rant about the lap cars? Do you think IndyCar needs to introduce a blue flag system so the lappers will have to get out of the way? And on the restarts, do you think it would be best to move them to the back of the pack so they're not interfering with the leaders?
On the restarts, for sure, move them towards the back of the pack. I would say this: it's one thing to try to get a lap back if you find yourself on the tail end of a lead lap or just behind the leader and you have a faster car than the leader. I'm all for allowing yourself to try to unlap yourself and get back on the lead lap, and then hopefully you catch a caution at the right time and can catch back up to the pack from there, and then you're back in the race. But if you're the fifth car one lap down, you're in the middle of a battle for seventh place or whatever, you have no business up there, to be quite honest. You've got to get to the back of the pack and just let the lead lap cars race for themselves and not influence that battle in any way that you don't need to be influencing it. So I don't know if they need a blue flag system in the exact same way that Formula One has one, but something's got to change because, I think Pato O'Ward in particular certainly was not wrong with his rant there at the end of his post-race interview this weekend here. It certainly is an issue that needs to be looked at going forward.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then with the lap cars, that's another issue, is the rules that IndyCar has are awful as well. There's just so many rules in IndyCar that are just like, they're not, it's just weird and wrong. I don't like them. And another thing I wanted to ask you guys was about the yellow flag during like a pit cycle, would you guys prefer they follow F1's idea of they keep the pit open when a yellow comes out so they can still come and pit, or would you rather have what NASCAR does, where it's like they do throw a yellow right away, maybe sometimes a little too soon, but they still have the pit cycle happen. They don't care if it's in the middle of the cycle. Like, which would you prefer in that case?
I would say, because CART used to do the same thing where it was similar to F1. Here comes the caution. If you could get into the pit road, you right away did that because that advantage of you didn't have to worry about losing so many pits. Of course, the big thing, and I think it's funny, we're talking about caution when it's thrown. We know Kevin Harvick's race was thrown out because of the caution coming out. Can you imagine if race control, oh, we're just going to wait so we don't ruin Kevin Harvick's race? Oh, we'll be talking about that for a long time to come. But I think that IndyCar does need to look at how we do this because you can't just be inconsistent with the cautions. We can't talk about, oh, we're going to ruin the race. And then the lap cars. I know that's been something where in the oil is becoming an issue. Here's becoming an issue. Do we really need to have the lap cars in between positions of cars that are not a lap down on the lead lap? Why can't we readjust them where they go towards the back? Don't bring up the idea of double file restarts. We don't want IndyCar to be looking at that, but I think we got to make some improvements because at the end of the day, while I think we all agree what we like about IndyCar, it is a pure race. You watch the Indy 500, you could go caution-free potentially. There's no stage cautions. We don't have exactly rules to equalize the field as much as other series. But when you have situations like this where race control displays a caution, they're just allowing lap cars to get in the way, essentially spoiling the race for others. Is that really good for the fan experience? Is that good for the drivers? Is that good for sponsorship and TV ratings? I think those are factors IndyCar needs to start looking at and considering.
I just think we need to get away from the mindset that we can somehow avoid having somebody's race advantage or disadvantage the moment a caution or a safety car comes out. It's inevitable. Whatever you do, because Alex, like you mentioned, Formula One has very different rules for when the pits are open under the safety car or the caution period. How many times have we talked about a driver winning an F1 race or scoring points or getting a podium or whatever, or losing the opportunity to win a race because of an ill-timed safety car or a well-timed safety car? Whatever you do, whatever your rules are, it's always going to positively impact somebody and negatively impact somebody else. I don't think there's really a good way around it. Joe, like you mentioned, I know Kevin Harvick would certainly be asking for a rule change based on what happened last night in a NASCAR race, but it's so hard to find a way to neutralize everything and make sure nobody comes out on top or behind based on what happens or when a caution period falls, when a safety car period falls. So I think it's a very tough situation for a sanctioning body to be in. So we might as well just not do what IndyCar did yesterday, and either it's a caution or it's not. It comes out the moment it has to for safety reasons.
Yeah,
Totally agree.
Yeah. With that said, I guess we'll move on to our next topic. In the race itself, very competitive, way more competitive than last year from my vantage point. The race had over 300 overtakes. Rinus VeeKay started 13th, moved up several positions and finished 6th. David Malukas all the way from 23rd to 8th. Yeah, and he got the biggest mover award. But we also saw some surprises as well. Last season, it was Team Penske all the way. Penske perfect all weekend in Portland, but it was kind of surprising. Joseph Newgarden, the only Team Penske driver in the top 5. Scott McLaughlin was 9th, and he was confident that he could win. Will Power, Alexander Rossi, both of them had issues. They ended up running the race. Power spun off early in the race, then Rossi clipped the back of Ericsson, and very lucky he didn't go flying in the air during that incident. Both of their races ruined, both finished off the lead lap. Alex, in your opinion, what was the biggest surprises of the race for you? From you, good or bad?
Yeah, I think Joseph Newgarden's recovery was a big surprise because he had that contact with Kyle Kirkwood on lap 1. And I thought, well, just another bad race in a row here for Joseph Newgarden, but managed to recover pretty nicely. Still got 5th. He stretched it long on that first stint and was really able to bring a solid finish out of it. And I think that's a lot of momentum these guys needed on that 2 team.
I guess the biggest surprise in the race for me was the fact that Graham Rahal wasn't a little bit more competitive for the win. I picked him to win and pick a winner. So that was a little surprising to me that he fell as far back as he did. The surprise of the season, I guess, for me, if you want to talk about Power and Rossi, is that neither of them won a race yet. I know Power's like Scott Dixon, he's got that consecutive seasons with at least one win streak that Dixon was able to save and has saved a couple of times now over the last few races. But Power's got one more chance to do it at Laguna Seca. And then Alexander Rossi only has one podium the entire year. I just had to double check that before I went into this segment here. I thought it was kind of going to be like a Kyle Busch situation, moving to a new team, getting a fresh new environment and a fresh start, and maybe he'd win a couple races and perhaps even contend for a championship. He hasn't had a terrible season, I suppose, by his standards, but it certainly hasn't been great either. He hasn't been the championship contender, but he was his first several seasons at Andretti, thinking back to like 2018, 2019, in that time period. So, we'll see if either of them can pick up the win. It's kind of a mic drop end of season moment at Laguna Seca, but very surprised that they struggled as much as they did yesterday as well.
Rinus VeeKay has to be my biggest surprise for this weekend. Last year, this race was not that great for him. In fact, he got a penalty with contact with Jimmy Johnson. Never seemed to really have anything. This year, he felt like the car had pace. Qualifying didn't exactly go his way, but what an effort for that team to move up into the top 10. We know that team does not seem to be at the exact level it should be. I would also say Christian Lundgaard was sort of a surprise as well because he didn't get to move up as far as we thought. Last year, great racecraft. He was very confident when we talked to him on Friday. Qualifying, just the poor timing of going out there, not getting a fast lap again, that ruined his weekend, it seems, because just afterwards, a lot of people anticipated we're going to see him move towards the front because he was quick all weekend. That just did not happen. So that was a unfortunate situation for that team, but those were two that stand out to me.
Rinus VeeKay, like that team at Carpenter Racing. It's no secret in the last few years or so, this team the performance has fallen off quite a bit. I remember early on in Rinus VeeKay's IndyCar career, these cars were really fast everywhere, and they had the potential to finish up in the top 10 and have some really good finishes. But for some reason, the last couple of years, it really seems like this team has really struggled outside of the Indianapolis 500 in terms of speed. And for them to come to Portland and have Rinus VeeKay look like the Rinus VeeKay of old in these Carpenter Racing cars, it's certainly a good sign for the future. And it seems like Ryan Hunter-Reay, being the veteran that he is, coming in, helping the team evaluate their programs and where they're at. It really seems like that RHR is helping steer this team in the right direction and also serve as an older mentor to Rinus VeeKay as well. But one of my biggest surprises was Felix Rosenqvist finished on the podium, because it seems like whenever Felix is having a good race, something always goes wrong with him. I think Felix could have had a lot more better finishes during his tenure with Arrow McLaren if it wasn't for circumstances not going in his favor, such as crashes and things out of his control. But for him to finish on the podium at Portland, I think this certainly has to feel like a huge win for him in that number 16. And I believe we have a comment in the chat room. Yeah, hello, hope you're enjoying today's show. And now moving on to another controversial topic. Romain Grosjean leaving Portland. There's a rumor going around that this could be his last race with Andretti Autosport, and potentially we may not see him next week in the number 28 DHL Honda at Laguna Seca. Marshall Pruitt from Racer.com said this could happen after the big blow-up you saw on Saturday. On race morning, there was a big team meeting that was held in their area of the paddock. Lap 1, Grosjean made heavy contact with Callum Ilott, who had an off and was coming back on the track. Grosjean returned to the race 10 laps down for repairs and ended up retiring from the race after completing several more laps. Joe, you saw the team working on the repairs, and once Grosjean retired from the race, do you sense this could be the end of his tenure with Andretti? Not next weekend after Laguna Seca, but right after Portland, not even going to the finale with the team, because it really seems like, both sides are just completely done with each other.
Both sides seem completely done with each other, especially at qualifying. It was very tense, heated. We saw Grosjean, after being eliminated from qualifying, he was not happy at all. That morning, traditionally when you walk through the paddock, it's pretty quiet at that time of the day when we got there, but we saw the 28 DHL team all huddled around, and it looked like this was not just a casual meeting. This was serious business. So unfortunately we can't hear what was being said, but we do know there was an effort to try to get something going positive. And then that first lap, What I found very interesting was they brought out the car to the garage area. Roman stayed in the car as they were working on it. I felt it sounds like, okay, they're trying to get the car ready, keep going, because whatever was discussed, they're just going to try to make the best of it, because he came back 10 laps down. So they knew the only way they'll pick up position if we had more crashes, more drivers going out. But then all of a sudden, it just seemed like he came into pit road. We were there. Car was shut off. He climbed out. There was some words exchanged. It didn't seem like they were exactly like, hey, we did the best we could effort. It seemed like, again, Grosjean was just frustrated. The team did not seem to be to the point where they were talking about, hey, great effort. We did the best we could. It just seemed like we're done. Everyone's starting to pack up and head their own way. Grosjean then left on his little scooter. It was really seems like this team does not have the chemistry there, and I'm really am wondering because I would be surprised if Grosjean is not at Laguna Seca. It's like, are you really going to let a bad weekend here take you out of next weekend? I think just finish out the season. That seems to be the best approach. But if they just can't get along together, I feel really unfortunate for the DHL folks because they pour in a lot of money into this team to have a star name like Grosjean, and it just does not seem to be working at all.
Well, Joe, let me ask you this, and forgive me, I'm hearing this for the first time here as we're doing the show. It wouldn't shock me based on what happened this weekend and how the relationship has been trending, but we're hearing rumors that maybe Grosjean could be going back to Dale Coyne Racing. If that might be his best avenue to stay in the IndyCar series, would that mean that he and Malukas would just do a swap for Laguna Seca and join their new teams a race early, or would that mean Grosjean's not going to be at Laguna Seca at all? What are you hearing on that?
That is something where when we started hearing that, we have not heard details of who would be in the 28 or a potential swap. Now, of course, Alex did share that there was a report going around that there could be essentially Grosjean going back to the 51. As Josh mentioned yesterday, it seemed like Grosjean was just, under pressure, not doing good. And as Alex mentioned yesterday, Dale Coyne Racing, if you get a top 5 finish, they're happy with you. Not exactly cutting it with Andretti Autosport. That would be something else if that was the change that all of a sudden happened early, where you had David Malukas in the DHL. It could maybe be a potential because there's rumors of where DHL is going next year. If David Malukas could go out there and get a surprise good run, or even a podium to just shock everybody, and Reddy could say, look, DHL, we're getting everything together. Do not bail on us.
I think the problem with that is that Malukas is more rumored to go the McLaren 6 now rather than Andretti. So a few weeks ago, I'd be like, yeah, that would make sense. But now it sounds like he's going to go to McLaren instead of Andretti. But if they're going to run the 29 next year, because we're pretty sure Marcus Ericsson's going to be in the 28 next year. If they're going to run the 29 and we don't know for sure if they are, they're thinking about downsizing just 3 teams, then I could see a situation where we'll have a tryout driver, like maybe bring Oliver Askew back, or if you want to have Jake Dennis try out a race or something, you could do something like that. But if you're not going to run the 29 next year, I really don't see a benefit of taking Grosjean out unless you're going to have someone to drive that car next year. If it was Malukas, I'd be all for that. But again, that doesn't sound like that's what's happening.
Yeah, the situation with Grosjean is really, really crazy to see how this all went down inside. It was just real watching the scene, because typically that's something that we wouldn't see, but that would be happening behind closed doors with all the frustration. But to see a closed door type situation happening out in the open, it just shows and speaks volumes of how both sides are really frustrated with each other. I know Michael Andretti's been open talking to the media, about frustration, how Grosjean isn't a team player, how he berates the team with his temper and all of that. And we've seen that on full display several times this season, screaming at his engineers, member of the Andretti team. And we saw Grosjean yelling at them after qualifying, and the Andretti team, they were barking right back at him. It just seems like this relationship, is just completely deteriorated, and they're just waiting for the final day so they can part ways. I'm sure both sides will be very happy to move on from this situation, because it's gotten very, very ugly fast, and it completely boiled over in Portland. And if both sides were to part ways after Portland, not even do Laguna Seca, I'm sure IndyCar Super Sub Connor Daly would be glad to step in for a race. He would probably be the number one option, since it seems like whenever Connor Daly doesn't have a full-time ride in the series, he's always the number one choice to be a super sub. I'm sure Connor would be very excited to drive an Andretti car on a road course in a competitive seat like that. And moving on to our final topic in this IndyCar section, for sure the Astor Cup is going to be there for Alex Palou at Laguna Seca, a two-time champion. Worst finish of the year is 8th place twice, which is really crazy considering all the circumstances that can happen in a racing season. And your worst finish is 8th twice. 5 wins, ended up winning at Laguna Seca last year. Alex Palou has undoubtedly done a great job this season, but he still has some off-the-track legal issues with Zach Brown and McLaren to sort out over the off-season. And Chip Ganassi, if you watched his interview yesterday after the race, when asked if Palou would return next season, he said for sure that Alex Palou would be in his car next season. We know the champion is the face of the series in 2020. Palou was new to IndyCar. He was a popular new champion in 2021. Is it odd and maybe not a good look for IndyCar when your current champion is potentially going to court?
Yeah, there's definitely not good publicity necessarily around Alex Palou being the champion, just because of all of his legal drama. And, this is like a more widely known topic in the world of motorsport because it involves Formula One. So a lot of people are aware of this. Alex Palou just got another championship, and he's in these contract dramas. He told Ganassi he wasn't coming back. Now he's telling McLaren he ain't going to go there, and he's going to stay at Ganassi. He doesn't have the greatest reputation, but I mean, he is champion. He's a well-worthy champion, I believe. And it's a very interesting situation. I'm not necessarily upset he's champion because of everything. Like I said, he's definitely a worthy champion. But I don't know. There's definitely a question to be there. Is this bad for the series? I'm not sure. Maybe time will tell, though.
It was very interesting. After the race, Chip Ganassi, he came up to the media center for the press conference, and he said, Palou is going to be with us for a while. And then when Palou got there, he's looking forward to being with Chip Ganassi for a while. And you could get a sense that everybody sort of knew there's a lot more going on behind the scene. There's a lot of stories going on about what's going to happen with Palou, with McLaren, with this lawsuit. And I felt Palou on the track, great. Talking to fans, members of the media, comes off as just very nice, friendly. But I think when it comes to the other drivers, it seems like his reputation is very much questioned as to what's going on with this contracts talk. A lot of mixed messages, signals all around. I think the biggest thing was just how from a year ago, everything with McLaren, and now here we are again. And then Chip Ganassi saying, hey, it was McLaren that started all this. I got a sense this wasn't just something McLaren all started, because it takes two to start talking to each other. It wasn't like McLaren just brought in an offer and Palou unwillingly or unknowingly signed up for it. He had to engage in that. So I think there's a lot of questions about Palou being the champion. And the thing, too, I feel sort of a lot of people don't seem to talk about. Remember, NTT was Palou's sponsor when he won the championship. That's the series champion. The series title sponsor. The next year, he still had NTT. Then here's all this drama. NTT goes to McLaren. And now it looks like Palou's not going to go there. And their champion this year has a different sponsor. It's just something where I feel like, is he really helping the sport when if NTT had stuck around thinking that Palou was not going to leave for McLaren, they'll have NTT banners with his uniform all over, because now he has the American Legion uniform, so that's going to be in all the championship swag. I just feel like it's not exactly doing IndyCar the biggest of favors. Very personal when you talk to him. Seems like a great character, but we just know there seems to be quite a good number of baggage starting to add up behind the scenes.
And with NTT, I think they went to McLaren to follow Alex Palou there. So they're probably not very satisfied with how this has all turned out at all. They're probably like, he's going to come over a little later now. It's okay. But now they're not going to get him, period. They're stuck on the 6 car. So I don't know. It's gonna be interesting, just overall how this turns out for him. But also another thing about sponsorship, DHL with Andretti. We just talked about that. They might be leaving. Are they going to go to Ganassi? Could that be a team that would they want to go over there and sponsor Palou or maybe Linus Lundqvist? I don't know. There's a lot of questions about sponsorship too.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I'm thinking back to, when was it, 2011? I think Michael Andretti mentioned that the fact that they were able to buy that ride from AJ Foyt Racing after Ryan Hunter-Reay failed to qualify. That was a big part of why DHL stuck around, and look at where they are now 12 years later and how strong that partnership has been. So there's certainly sponsorship questions to play into this whole saga as well. And I think if you're Alex Palou, even though you're a champion and obviously one of the biggest stars of the series now, 2 championships in 3 years, only 4 years into your career, one of the best young talents clearly in the series here today, you would think sponsors would be all over trying to get, just a little piece of that livery there for Alex Palou's number 10 car. But when you have off-track issues like this, I think it might turn some sponsors off and maybe make it harder for him to find those partners to fund the rest of his IndyCar Series career, because he clearly has a talent. There's no debate over that. But I don't think it's a great look when you have all these off-track issues hanging over you. And for IndyCar as well, even though it's not necessarily their fault that Alex Palou has made the decisions that he's made, McLaren have made the decisions that they've made, just the mess that your series champion's in right now, I don't think it's a very good look for the series. And I think I don't know that, there's any bad blood between the series and Alex Palou or anything, but they certainly have to be a little bit annoyed, I think, that there's this cloud hanging over the champion's head, so to speak, with all these off-track issues. So I don't think it's a great look. I also don't think it's a great look that IndyCar crowned their champion a race early, so I think we need to bring in some IndyCar playoffs starting in 2024 to ensure that we have a championship battle that goes down to the last race. I'm kidding about that one. Please don't do that. But in terms of Palou, of course, obviously a very, very popular talent, very great talent, but he does need to get these off-track issues sorted, I think, in order to be considered in the long run with the Foyts and the Andrettis and the Dixons of the world in terms of his legacy, because I don't think this is a very good look right now.
Yeah, definitely, Ben. It's not a good look at all for Alex Palou, and hopefully all sides can figure out this legal stuff over the offseason. We can put this behind us and kick off the 2024 season on a more positive note. Is you're looking at this situation with Palou, Ganassi, and McLaren. This saga's been going on for over a year now. It looked like Palou was going to leave Ganassi, go to McLaren, angered all the people at Ganassi. Last year seemed to be quite a down year with this cloud hanging over their head. And then throughout the course of last offseason, throughout this season, Palou and Ganassi had mended fences, and it seemed like they're on a good note. And then he had pulled the rug out from McLaren and be like, nope, I'm staying with Ganassi. And as we talked about on Grid Tonight, I believe several weeks ago, we were saying that Alex Palou, just flip-flopping back and forth like this it's not a good look for him at all. Yeah, you can blame his management team that left him after he pulled the rug out from under them as well with the move to stay at Ganassi and not go to McLaren. Yeah, you can blame them and his representative, but at the end of the day, the buck stops with you, and that's Alex Palou. He's the one. His image is going to suffer, and being the series champion, you'd think in the future that you're not going to have any problems attracting sponsorship. But if I'm a sponsor, looking to sponsor a driver, although Alex Palou is an incredibly good race car driver, I would be kind of leery to sponsor him, considering all of the things he's been through with Ganassi and McLaren, because you never know, because you don't know if you can trust him or not. I think that's the biggest thing with Palou. Can you trust him? And it seems like at various points, especially last season, he seemed to lose some of the trust of his competitors as well. I know Scott Dixon didn't seem to be too pleased with how he handled the situation with Chip Ganassi Racing, and others as well that were kind of looking at him with the side eye, wondering like, guy, what are you doing here? And Alex Palou, I still think he has some work to do to repair his reputation. It's certainly going to take a while, but it's certainly not impossible. Hopefully moving forward, for the sake of his career, he'll make a lot of smarter decisions, not to tarnish what could be a very impressive legacy over the years. And like I was saying earlier, Palou is still very young, far from his prime. We could see him click off another 1, 2, 3, 4, or even 5 championships, potentially getting up to 6, matching his teammate Scott Dixon. So I really think Palou has a lot of potential to do some incredible things over the years in the IndyCar series. Before I move on to F1, got a comment here in the chat room. You saying that you're surprised that Joseph Newgarden isn't higher in the standings. I took a glance over at the IndyCar standings, and Joseph Newgarden is third in the standings. I know, so I'm not really sure how better of a season that you can get, but it just shows the great expectations that people have of Joseph Newgarden. I remember when he was coming up, a lot of people considered him to be one of the next great American superstar open wheel racers, and once he's gotten to Team Penske, it's been at a completely different level. One of the top drivers in the IndyCar series. He's champion, an Indy 500 champion. Now he's basically crossed off all the boxes and still hungry for more success. So driver would be really happy to finish third in the championship. Unfortunately, he won't be able to get up to second because Palou and Dixon have locked out the top two spots. But third's a really good year, and still people expect Joseph Newgarden to be higher in the standings.
Isn't that crazy that we're all disappointed in Joseph Newgarden for being third in the points standings, having an Indy 500 win and having 4 or 5 wins this year? It's a bad year for Joseph Newgarden. Third, gets all those wins. It's so funny. He's been off on the road and street courses this year. But as a fan of his personally, it is kind of hilarious that I'm just man, this season kind of sucked for Joseph Newgarden, but still, it's kind of funny in hindsight.
I was going to save this for a shining moment, but I do want to point out something that I heard on the broadcast yesterday as well. You want to talk about high expectations and point standings and rankings and everything. Scott Dixon clinched yesterday with his third place finish, a top 4 spot in the point standings, with the exception of, let me make sure I got it right here, it's 2016 when he finished 6th in the points. Every year aside from that, since 2006, he's been 4th or higher in the point standings. That is just a remarkable testament to his longevity and his dominance in terms of how great he's been for so long in this series with Chip Ganassi Racing. So I just wanted to point that out as well. Dixon and Newgarden, we're talking about them 3rd and 4th in points or whatever, and they're having down seasons. That just speaks to the expectations we have for their greatness.
So are we ready to move on to Formula One?
Yeah,
I believe so.
All right. So the Italian Grand Prix looked like it could be a Ferrari miracle, but Red Bull and Verstappen, they wanted to continue their winning streak. First, it started with Yuki Tsunoda's car having a mechanical issue during the formation lap. It gave a sense that this could be another wild Italian Grand Prix. But once Verstappen got around Carlos Sainz, it was game over. Max Verstappen gets his 10th win in a row. We now have 8 races remaining in the season with Singapore, Japan, Qatar, COTA, Mexico, Brazil, Las Vegas, and Abu Dhabi. Max has won at all of these tracks except Singapore, Qatar, and Las Vegas. However, Max has second place finishes in both Singapore and Qatar, and Las Vegas is, of course, a new track. So, Kobe, starting with you, is there any of these remaining tracks that you see a different team looking to take a win at this year?
No, not at all. It's been an unbelievably dominant season by Red Bull, and I think the only way another team is going to win this year is Max Verstappen stays at home. Because I know we've been waiting for the longest time, to be there's going to be a mechanical issue, there's going to be something that goes on to prevent Max Verstappen from winning this race. If you think he's going to make a mistake, that he's going to spin or something's going to go wrong in the pits and all that, the strategy is going to be off. But this Red Bull car is so strong, so reliable. I know this sounds crazy, but this final stretch of the season, it would actually not surprise me at this point if we see Max Verstappen win every race for the rest of the season. But who knows what could happen? But right now, if I'm the rest of the F1 paddock, I'm really disappointed about my chances moving forward, because it really seems like that Max Verstappen is not gonna. It totally looks unbeatable at the moment.
Man, I hope Checo can win Mexico. Can you imagine the scenes if he were able to pull that off? But I'm going to go on the record here, and we can clip this and either play it back awkwardly if I'm wrong, or we can tag it they already knew if I end up being right here. But I think Red Bull are going to do it. I think they're going to be the first team to pull off the perfect season, and I say that not just because of Max Verstappen's dominance, but because, again, even though Sergio Perez didn't qualify there, look at the results. Look at where he ended up. He was right there in second place. He got around the Ferraris as well. And you mentioned Alex not winning in Singapore for Max Verstappen. Who won Singapore last year? Who had arguably the best drive of his career last year in Singapore? It was Max Verstappen's teammate Checo Perez. I think Red Bull are absolutely unstoppable at the moment. And I think with how few races we have left in the season, with how dominant they look right now, I'm going to go out on a limb and say they pull it off. I think they win every race from here on out. Max will obviously get the majority of those. I hope Checo can get Mexico just for what that would mean for him and the unbelievable atmosphere that would be. But I think Max Verstappen, in particular, obviously 10 wins in a row, despite what Toto Wolff says about that being nothing more than a Wikipedia stat, it is a tremendous, tremendous achievement, and he deserves a lot of credit for it.
With those races, I anticipate Red Bull. They're going to be the easy favorite. It's just something where it's going to be maybe Sergio Perez, most likely Max Verstappen. But if there's anything I'm looking at, 3 particular races: Japan, Brazil, and maybe Singapore. What have we seen in those 3 tracks compared to the others? Rainy conditions. If we have a wet Japan, that opens the door for a lot of folks. We've seen Max. He's really good in the wet condition, especially that phenomenal drive in Brazil his first year with Red Bull. But overall, I feel like it looks like it's going to be straightforward Max Verstappen dominance throughout the rest of the season. But with those 3 tracks, if we get wet weather, that might open up some opportunities for everyone. Particularly, I'm thinking Alonso. He's really good in the rain. Lewis Hamilton seems to be hit or miss depending on what the car is doing and the conditions and which track. But, I mean, Qatar, I think Max Verstappen has got to be the favorite. Coda, Abu Dhabi, Las Vegas might be a wild card. I'll be shocked if there's rain there. Not very often that happens in Las Vegas, but just the nature of being a brand new track, maybe. But I anticipate Red Bull is still going to be the favorite for that weekend.
Well, just a couple things to follow up real quickly. Miami was a bit of a wild card last year, and we've seen what Red Bull and Max Verstappen have done on that track so far. So I expect Vegas will be more of the same. But also to your point about the weather, I think you mentioned it as well. But when did really, aside from winning his maiden race in Spain in 2016 after the Mercedes men took each other out, what put Max Verstappen on the map? It was that unbelievable drive in Brazil in the wet weather. So I just think that, even though we call rain the great equalizer, and I suppose maybe drivers are a little bit more prone to mistakes or accidents when you have wet conditions, we're talking about Max Verstappen here and how good he is in the wet. I just think there's too much going for them right now to say that, it's going to take a mechanical issue or some sort of unforced error or something not of their own doing to stop Red Bull from the perfect season at this point.
So behind the Red Bulls, you had Ferrari. The Ferraris were racing really hard at the end there after both the Red Bulls got around them. And at times, the two nearly collided. So Ben, starting with you, was this the right move by Ferrari to allow the 2 Ferrari drivers to race each other like that?
Yeah. This is called motor racing, right? That's what we're doing here. This is what the sport's all about. I understand that from Carlos Sainz's perspective, maybe you wouldn't want to lose out on your podium. Charles Leclerc is obviously going to have the very opposite opinion, or vice versa, depending on who's in first or who's in second or who's ahead, who's behind, in terms of what you should do there. But this is motor racing. That's what we're doing here. That's the whole point of this sport. The only rule is don't wreck each other. And if you do it a couple times and you can't not wreck each other, then I guess maybe you need to sit down and have a conversation. But I'm always against team orders. I'm always for letting drivers race for themselves and figure out who's going to be ahead of one another naturally on the track. I think Ferrari made the right decision letting their drivers race as much as tough as it must have been, watching that, and particularly on the final lap when Leclerc locked up and nearly went into the back of his teammate. I think it was ultimately the right decision at the end of the day. I have no problem with it at all.
Yeah, I also didn't have a problem with that either, Ben. And I know Ferrari took pole over Max, really shocked a lot of people. People were thinking maybe this is the day that Red Bull doesn't win a Formula One Grand Prix in 2023, but we knew it was only going to be a matter of time before Max was gonna be able to take the lead. And like you said, Alex, as soon as Max got out front, it was totally game over. I have no problem whatsoever with what Ferrari did. They were basically just racing for the best of the rest, because that Red Bull is unreal.
And before we move on to the rest of the field, we have a hello from Adam. Happy Labor Day to everyone. What a record-breaking weekend for sure. And Max Verstappen is unstoppable. That is very true, Adam. And now moving on, rest of the field, Alex Albon. He had a great weekend once again for Williams. He passed a McLaren. He was 7th place behind the 2 Red Bulls, Ferraris, and Mercedes. And he's kind of like Romain Grosjean, perhaps. He does better with little to no pressure. Very few expected him to have a great performance and have the great performances he has been putting in for Williams. Albon is now 13th in the point standing, 16 points away from being in the top 10. And then Japan, Coda, Mexico, Brazil, and Las Vegas all have long straights. Singapore is very windy, and Abu Dhabi has some mild straight sections. Is Albon finishing top 10 in the points a dream, or could this become a reality? Starting with you, Joe.
I say it's going to be reality because here's the big thing. As you mentioned, Japan, Coda, Mexico, Brazil, those long straightaways, that's going to help him, just like it did at Monza. Mexico, the high elevation, thinner air, I think they're going to easily have one of their best races as long as something doesn't go wrong mechanically or that first corner, because that is such a long straightaway in Mexico City. This team with Alex Albon has really been a great surprise. For Alex Albon to get to 10th place, he's going to have some hard competition, but those tracks look very favorable. Singapore, you don't have the long straightaways. Weather could be an issue. I think if they could just secure a point finish, 10th, 9th, that's a good day for the team. Abu Dhabi, you got a couple long straightaways, but it's not exactly long enough. There's still a lot of tight corners, short straightaways. I think that's going to be a hard track for them, but that's thankfully the last one for them. Try to capitalize on those other tracks where you know you got a big advantage. I think he gets done.
Joe, I'm gonna have to respectfully disagree. I'm actually gonna say that Alex Albon in that Williams finish in the top 10 is only gonna be a dream for him. I know Alpine didn't really have the Italian Grand Prix that they wanted this past weekend, especially with the strong race we saw from them at the Dutch Grand Prix as Zandvoort. It really seems like once Alpine has restructured their executives, sacking several people and promoting others in the interim roles, it really seems like there's still potential for Alpine to really get some good points to close out the 2023 season. And if the changes are any indication of what could come, I really think Gasly and Ocon are going to have several more good results. And Oscar Piastri, I know he didn't get the finish he wanted as well at the Italian Grand Prix. I still see him in the McLaren group continuing to figure things out, collect more points. So I think when you look at Alpine and McLaren, and I really think that they're just going to end up piling it on, and it's going to be really tough for Alex Albon to keep up with them. But I still think he's going to have several great runs throughout the rest of the year.
Yeah, I've got to side with Kobe on this one. I just think that when you look at who Albon has to go up against to try to break into the top 10, you've got Oscar Piastri, who is with a McLaren team and I think is on the up. They're much stronger than they were at the start of the year. I think Piastri is going to have a great opportunity to pick up plenty more points, maybe even a podium here and there. And you want to talk about podiums, both Alpines have one podium this year. So as much as I think there's some inter-team conflicts right now and not everything is all sunshine and roses over at Alpine, on their best day, they have a very strong car and they have some very strong drivers, both Formula One race winners in cars that were not top equipment, but they worked their cars right and found a way to the top step of the podium at one point in their careers, and Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon. So I just think when you look at the competition, I would be shocked if Alex Albon can break into the top 10. If he does, though, and unfortunately, if Logan Sargent is still on 0 points, I think that's honestly not going to be a very good look for him. I know Sargent was kicking himself after Q2 on Saturday, and I think that was ultimately when the points were lost for him. I know he put out a statement on social media saying he tried his hardest to hang on to P10 there at the end, and then I think got a 5-second penalty due to a contact with Bottas there at the end. So unfortunate for him. I think this was probably his best chance. But Joe, as you mentioned, there are several tracks coming up that do have some long straights. That's always been one of Williams' strengths, is the top line speed. I think they can credit the Mercedes power unit for that, particularly at the start of this turbo hybrid era. So not all hope may be lost for Logan Sargent at this point in terms of picking up some points at this point in the season. But you want to talk about where Williams is in the constructors right now, 7th place, and that all being what Alex Albon has done. Take nothing away from him. Top 10 might be a bit of a stretch in terms of where he's going to end up on the driver's side of things, but he is single-handedly boosting Williams on the constructor side of things, and that's great for a team that has desperately needed that over the last several years.
And with that, I'll toss it over to Kobe to talk about MotoGP.
Thank you, Alex. And at the start of MotoGP race, a really scary we saw Joe Sadler. We opened last Sunday's wrap-up show with tragic news of two riders who died in a Moto 1000 race in Brazil and the Catalan Grand Prix in Barcelona. We saw the scary first lap crash that we didn't want to see. First corner, 5 riders went down and Marco Bezzecchi hurt. Then Pecco Bagnaia in turn 3 got his legs run over. 6 Ducatis were involved, and Ed Bastianini has underwent 2 surgeries after starting the first corner crash. Then Bagnaia lost the rear and launched off the bike in the front of the field. Brad Bender ran over his leg and thankfully escaped major injury, multiple contusions, that is, and some bleeding under the skin. Bagnaia was seen on crutches, leaving the hospital, according to James Dillon from Crash.net. Joe, considering what happened at Brazil and to have this incident happening, just a week later, the MotoGP race director, stewards, and the FIM need to reevaluate how the races are officiated.
Originally, I was thinking no. But considering everything, not just with this incident, but throughout the years with the officiating of MotoGP, from how they allow drivers to be a lot more aggressive when it comes to contact, from Marc Marquez, Valentino Rossi, the difference in standards when it comes to officiating different riders. We know a lot of people have said it seems like MotoGP officials, Fabio Quartararo does the slightest amount of little contact with anybody, he gets a big penalty, and other riders just seem to look away. I think the FIM MotoGP race officials need to really reconsider this, because that was a really scary incident to see Pecco Bagnaia get launched high-sided the bike in front of the field, in front of the pack of riders on the first lap. Very dangerous situation. And he didn't even have the time to try to ride away, try to get up and start facing the field, because when Alex Marquez went down during the Dutch TT, he right away knew he was in trouble. He tried to get up, face the oncoming traffic so he could see who's coming and which way he needed to move. Pecco was on the floor, and Brad Binder, nowhere to go, ran over his legs. He continued on racing, but he said that was one of the worst feelings ever. You don't want to run over a fellow racer, and that was just something that I think really took a lot of energy out, because this is your championship leader. Thankfully, no serious injuries. He is potentially going to be back next race week. I know we'll talk more about that, but it was just really scary. And then to see Marco Bezzecchi, he was favoring his leg. He somehow kept running. Disastrous start for the weekend for the Ducati teams. Overall, it was just something really, I think, MotoGP, FIM, they need to reevaluate whether it's having that starting area in Spain and other tracks a little further back, so you don't have this big group coming to the first corner of the first lap to avoid these messes. Rider conduct, that could be a big reevaluation for the FIM MotoGP. They got a lot of work on hand.
Yeah, definitely a lot of work to do. It was unfortunate to see this incident happen, like I was saying, especially after the two fatalities we saw last week in the Moto 1000 event in Brazil. And hopefully all of these riders will be able to recover and get back on their feet as soon as possible. And moving on, Aprilia ended up sweeping the weekend with Aleix Espargaro taking the win, and Maverick Vinales second, with Jorge Martin in third. Martin is now 50 points behind Bagnaia, who's aiming to return for next weekend's race at Misano in Italy. If Bagnaia cannot make it back next weekend, he'll still be the points leader regardless of what happens. Even if Martin were to sweep the sprint and the feature race, what's going through the factory Ducati team this week?
I think right now they're just focused on making sure Pecco Bagnaia has a good recovery and is near 100% for next race weekend. This is not a situation worth rushing, because he's still going to be the points leader whether he ends up racing or not racing next race weekend. So if you're going to still be the points leader, you got to just, I think, take this with a side of caution and just, make sure he's 100%, because we still got a long season left for MotoGP. We're just a little past the halfway point. We're not talking about the last 3 races, and you're going to have potentially the points deficit cut down significantly more. I think at the end, we've seen from Jorge Martin, he has really good weekends. He has improved a lot compared to last year, where he was very inconsistent, crashing while leading even. This year, he's a lot better. I just don't anticipate him to really close the gap that much. In Misano, yes, he was going to have a fast bike, but so will the other Ducati riders. I think he's going to still cut into the lead no matter what happens. But for Pecco Bagnaia, I don't think this is worth rushing it. If he could sit out and be 100% ready for the following race, I think he'll do it. Ducati, take care of the riders because at the end, they still have big control over this championship.
And one of the beauties about the point system in series like MotoGP and Formula One is, only a certain amount of riders score points. It's not like your other championships in the world where you sit out a race and then effectively it's going to kill your season. So Pecco Bagnaia could sit out this next race and be like, this will be like our quote unquote DNF. Yeah, because even if he raced and then crashing out or not finishing the points, he's still not going to score anyway. So he could just take this as a DNF type of situation in return for the next race weekend. So I totally agree with you, Joe. I think Pecco and his team really need to focus on him getting 100%. If he's not filling up to it this weekend, I don't see any reason why he should be there. There's nothing wrong with sitting out, especially if he's still going to be the points leader, because who knows, second and third in the championship may, end up DNFing themselves. And then, points leader is going to remain the same. And then it wouldn't matter whether Pecco Bagnaia raced or not. And last year, Enea Bastianini had a career season, and this year he's had his worst season. A lot of speculation on his future. It's really crazy how 1 year, you're on top of the world, and then the next year you've completely fallen off the mountain. If Jorge Martin continues his run for second place and even closes the gap to Bagnaia to make it a genuine points battle for the championship, do you think we could see a seat swap here?
It's going to be really interesting to see what they decide, because I feel Bastianini, from the beginning of the season, he was injured on the first race, no fault of his own. You come back, not exactly having that great of a season, but Pecco Bagnaia, he's been riding that bike all year long. So it's just one of those deals where the lack of seat time is not helping him out. When it comes to this crash, the injury, he's going to sit out. I think it'll be really premature to remove Enea Bastianini and swap seats. Yeah, Jorge Martin is making a really great season, doing the best in that independent team with the Ducati support. I think it's best just to keep it as is for 2024, give Bastianini that equal opportunity for next year with the new bike to show what he can do. I think the second season is going to be more critical for Bastianini in MotoGP. And of course, we'll be covering MotoGP throughout the rest of the season. We're now going to switch over to the NASCAR Cup Series and the Southern 500, Cookout Southern 500, Labor Day weekend tradition at Darlington Raceway. And Kyle Larson, he finally got the win at Darlington. He wanted this race. He says one of his biggest race wins, and first time he's won since Martinsville, long time ago. So, Alex, has Kyle Larson become sort of that sleeping giant that is now awake, and does everyone need to go through him and that number 5 team?
I think Kyle Larson's been quite awake, quite honestly. I think he's been awake all year, because there's been several times this year where a win has just gotten away from him. I can think of the first Kansas race, the first Darlington race, Pocono, and he's always had this speed all year long, and I was just kind of waiting last night for something to happen. I thought if Reddick got to him, he'd get taken out or something. But it didn't happen last night, and this is how Kyle Larson needed to start these playoffs, kind of just put some confidence in their step there. And they're a threat in this championship. I think they're in my championship 4, and I don't think the 5 team's been sleeping at all. They've been here the whole time.
Now, I think Kyle Larson is obviously, if not the best, one of the best drivers in the Cup Series today, and he has one of the best teams underneath him in Hendrick Motorsports, which, by the way, had 2 cars that didn't make it into the playoffs this year. Now, I know the 9 teams in the Owners' Championship, but all the prestige, all the attention's on the Drivers' Championship right now, and I think that might even help elevate the 5 team and the 24 to a lesser extent as well. But when you look at Kyle Larson, I think he's in prime position to take another championship. And obviously, there's a lot that can happen in this format. Let's not count our chickens here before they hatch. But Kyle Larson is certainly a threat. And if drivers aren't taking him seriously as one, they need to change that, because obviously this is a proven champion with a proven championship caliber team, and they proved it once again last night.
As you said, I think he isn't exactly the sleeping giant, because even though he was in the top 4 in the seeding, he got that win. He's in the next round, so he could really take it easy in the next 2 races, focus on the next round, which is really tricky. The Roval, Talladega, you got really one race where you're in control. Big moment where we saw 2 vehicles out of control, and the controversial one, the crash between Bowman and Suarez. Alex Bowman blocked Daniel Suarez one time on the front stretch, and then he made a second block, moving to the outside. Daniel Suarez got on the right rear. That sent him to the wall, but then Suarez lost control, slid down, and Harrison Burton, nowhere to go, hit him. Both days were done for them, plus Harrison Burton's day was done as well. Now, afterwards, Suarez said you cannot block him twice. And we seem to get a lot of people agreeing that you cannot do 2 blocks, then you're just asking for trouble. Bowman said he may have regretted it, but accused Daniel Suarez of doing dumb moves in past races. Dale Jr. said it was a little bit of both of them because they both ruined top 10 runs that they were having at Darlington. Ben, starting with you, what is your take on this incident between the 2 of them?
I'm going to have to disagree with Dale Jr. here. I don't know, but it's 100% on Alex Bowman because I think you could make the argument maybe Suarez could have gotten off the gas a little bit sooner than he did. But if you block more than once, even if you block once, you're taking a risk. If you block more than once, you're just asking for trouble. And I think Alex Bowman, is certainly predominantly to blame for this incident here. It's unfortunate that they tore up a couple of good cars, but you can't do that on the straightaway and expect to get away with it most of the time. And it's unfortunate. And I hate to see that there were so many back and forth comments, not just between Bowman and Suarez there, but I think Travis Mack got on Twitter and had some things to say as well. So, just an unfortunate deal for both of them. But I think Bowman predominantly at fault based on how he blocked Daniel Suarez going into the first corner.
This was just very avoidable. I think Alex Bowman went too far with that second block. There was no reason for that. You're not racing for a championship anymore. It's not. If this was for the win of the finish of the race, like last lap, then sure, by all means, go for it and do this kind of racing. But you're racing for 5th or 6th. You're not in the playoffs. It's just kind of silly to me. For me, this is all on Bowman. I think that last incident where they got into the wall, Suarez probably could have backed off, but I think he was just so mad he wasn't going to get off the gas, so I get it. But little self-promo here. Listen to the Gay Racing podcast this week because my friend Zach does not agree with me at all, and we were arguing last night about this. So we're going to have a heated debate on the Gay Racing podcast this week about this topic, so that'll be fun. But I just think this is all on Bowman. I don't like how this turned out at all.
And that was the thing I was sort of surprised. Bowman, being so aggressive, lost a top 10 position. Even though he's out of the playoffs, if he's scoring top 10 points, that means a playoff driver is not scoring that top 10 points. If he's out of the picture, that's another person gaining more points in the playoffs. It's just one of those deals. I feel Bowman more at fault at this. Because Suarez maybe have backed off a little bit. Well, that's Suarez's call. But at the end, as Ben mentioned, even when you do one block, there's no guarantee that the person behind you is going to lift. We know hard racing always seems to be the big name in NASCAR. Larson, with his hard effort to get the win, he moves on to the next round. Bubba Wallace, Kevin Harvick, Ricky Stenhouse, and Michael McDowell below the cut line. McDowell got caught up in a crash with Denny Hamlin. Reddick, he finished second. He's third in the playoffs, and he said if he really wanted to push, he was afraid he could crash, and then, of course, that would negate all the progress he made. But one of the big things we saw, he had to race Ryan Newman really hard at going back to sort of that battling lap traffic. Ryan Newman was already one lap down, racing Reddick really hard. This allowed Kevin Harvick to catch up. I was starting to think maybe this is something to help another Ford driver get caught up. But then when Kevin Harvick was going to go make the pit stop, Newman spins around, caution comes out, no race control waiting to not ruin anybody's race, but the race was ruined for Kevin Harvick. He got a penalty. Overall, Newman, he finished 27th in this race. Kevin Harvick, 19th, not the day he was looking at originally. Alex, starting with you. Was Newman a bit out of line to race Reddick so hard and then to cause a caution? And this is essentially ruining the chance of another Ford team, which, by the way, Stewart-Haas Racing has helped Rick Ware Racing before.
So I don't put any blame on Ryan Newman. at all for the situation, because Tyler Reddick was also trying to pit here and was going to try making it way too late and slowed down. Newman basically spun himself out to avoid running into Tyler Reddick, as that's how it looked to me at least. And so for me, this is on Reddick. It was kind of a weird situation. It's like he wasn't going to make the pits anyway. He was way up high. And then Harvick, the thing with Harvick is he was pitting. He could have stayed out. It was too late, so he pit. But then the penalty was because he actually stopped in his pit stall and got service. He could have just drove through the pits and not served a penalty. But the Ford team made the call to do the pit anyway, and that's why they got the penalty. So I don't think anything's on Ryan Newman at all. I think for me, the Ford team made a big mistake twice, quite frankly, mostly the second part to get the penalty. And then Reddick just made a weird decision to try pitting really late.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between racing the leader and trying to stay on the lead lap or not lose another lap, and then, affecting a battle in traffic, which I think was what Pato O'Ward was complaining about in the IndyCar race there. So I can't put a ton of blame on Ryan Newman at all. Like you said, Alex, I think this is more on Reddick and just an unfortunate situation, obviously, that kind of took Kevin Harvick out of contention there. And I could get on my anti-playoff soapbox here and talk about how that's proof that, this sport is just too chaotic for a format like this, because we could have been talking about Kevin Harvick winning a race and being on the next round, and now he finishes down in the teens, and it's an uphill battle even more than it already was for him. It's little things like that can just completely change the outcome of the season. But like we said in the IndyCar part of the debate here, I think that, you can't control when an accident's going to happen or when a caution's going to come out. It's just an unfortunate deal for Harvick. But again, I can't put too much of the blame on Newman either.
And one of the things that you mentioned, the uphill battle for Harvick, Bubba Wallace, early on, he spun. He had an uphill battle at Darlington all day, recovered for a top 10 finish, and that team has been just putting together some great races, including on a road course where Bubba has not had the best success at. He is only 1 point behind the cut line. Ahead of him, Christopher Bell, who got the pole. A lot of people anticipate he was going to get the win, but had a disastrous day. He is now 12, 1 point above the cut line. Bubba, with his steady run, he's looking pretty good. Bell, we know what happened to him last year in the playoffs. It seemed he got into situations where he was in a must-win situation to advance, and he would get the win. I don't anticipate he could really pull that off 2 years in a row. I don't think the team could anticipate that they're going to just, hey, we're in a must-win, let's just go out there, win, and get that win. Is Christopher Bell on that 20 team, which, by the way, just got a faster pit crew from Ty Gibbs, is that team in trouble?
Well, they really need to stop putting themselves in these situations where they're like at the cut line or way below it. Because like you said, Joe, they were in the situation twice last year in the playoffs, and they managed to escape it with the win to make it to the championship 4. But you're not going to be able to do that every single time. So if they have a bad race again at Kansas and they're going to have to go into Bristol and maybe win that, you can't do that. You can't put yourself in that position all the time. Like, they've done it before, sure, but your luck's going to run out at some point. And for this kind of an opening race for that 20 team is pretty disastrous, quite honestly.
Yeah, I don't know what's up with Toyota and their pit crews or whatever, because, how many times we talked about 2311 not having a good pit stop when their drivers, Bubba Wallace and Tyler Reddick, desperately need one. So Christopher Bell might not be in trouble as a driver, but if his team continues to let him down like this, and the team is certainly going to be in trouble in terms of fighting for a championship. So, there's certainly something, a conversation needs to be had there, because this has been a recurring problem with Toyota's teams, despite the fact that they've made these pit crew swaps in the past before, trying to put the better crews with the better teams. It still seems to come back to bite them. So it's an unfortunate deal for them. I think some conversations need to be had in the offseason to try to prevent that in 2024.
And you mentioned the Toyota pit crews. Denny Hamlin looked like he was going to cruise to the win, dominated. They had that loose wheel. They couldn't find proof of a loose wheel, but Denny Hamlin felt something. And then it was fine after that, so there must have been a loose wheel. The 23 had a slow pit stop early, and he managed to recover. Really proud of Bubba Wallace, by the way, being able to recover. He could not have done that like a year or two ago. Very proud of him. But yeah, these Toyota teams are just bizarre. I think the 45 was the only Toyota that didn't have some sort of weird issue. The 19, where was he? Where was Martin Truex yesterday? And that was a car, that was my winner. Like, that's who I thought was going to win. Just nowhere to be seen. So Toyota, there's some inconsistency going on in the pits and with their car setup. Something weird's going on there.
Yeah, Truex, it was like he just never showed up. And a lot of people anticipate him to be one of the favorites to win. To have two Toyotas right there at the cut line, they cannot be exactly thrilled about that. Granted, it seems Bubba Wallace seems to be on the upward trend. Christopher Bell, I mean, you gave one of the fastest pit crews from Ty Gibbs to that 20 team. You anticipate this is going to work, and it did it. And so many people thought Tyler Reddick was going to be in trouble because of his pit crew. Overall, they got the job done, but it's going to be really interesting in the next 9 races in the NASCAR Cup Series. We'll bring back Kobe Lambeth to talk about the grid ranking.
Yeah, looking at the grid ranking for this week, it's week 23 already. There's no changes in the top 10 within the positions, but some of the scores have changed. Pekka Bagnaya's scores dropped after that scary crash, and his status is up in the air for next weekend. Joe, if Pekka Bagnaya is unable to race next weekend, how will this impact his score in the grid ranking?
It really depends on if Pekka Bagnaia is on the entry list for the next race weekend. One of the things we've seen in the grid rank and how it works, if the driver's on the entry list and makes an attempt to get to the track and try to race, he is scored as making that attempt. So if he makes that attempt and doesn't race, his score will drop because essentially it's a DNF. However, if it's announced early on he is not coming to the track, usually by the Thursday deadline, then it doesn't count against him, and then his score will not be affected at all. So it's really going to be interesting to see what happens with Pekka Bagnaia, if the team is going to have him ready for the race weekend or not. I think probably by Wednesday we'll know, but since he did not have any fractures, broken legs, I think he might be racing this weekend.
Yeah, it would be great to see Pekka Bagnaia racing this weekend. And now looking at the rest of the grid ranking, Max Verstappen continues to close on claiming the 2023 grid ranking world championship. Nobody has ever led from start to finish. The closest was Shane Van Gisbergen, who led every week except for week 1 in 2022. And next weekend, a little bit on the lighter side, World Rally Championship, IndyCar season finale, and then the NASCAR Cup Series race. And now I'm going to turn it over to Alex for our Grid One Shining Moment of this week.
That's right, Kobe. It's time for Shining Moment. If you're in the chat room, let us know if you have your Shining Moment of the weekend. So, Joe, what's your Shining Moment?
My Shining Moment for the weekend has to go to the volunteers that allow all the races to occur, where you're the marshals ensuring that drivers are warned of unsafe conditions, waving the local yellows, ensuring that fans do not get in the wrong spots and cause a safety issue. To all the volunteers that help track promoters all across the world, they are pretty much unsung heroes, because without them, we could not race safely. They make a huge effort. Some of them, not all of them are exactly the biggest race fans, but they just know, hey, this is something that I want to be involved with, something where, this is a good opportunity to learn something new, or they have a good friend that drugged them into helping out. They are the ones that make it possible, whether it's from Formula One, IndyCar, NASCAR, the volunteers that allow us to race, and especially the marshals. The marshals, we know they put themselves in dangerous situations at times, but they do that because they love motorsports, and without them, we cannot be watching motorsports safely. My shining moment goes out to all the volunteers that allow the races to occur.
Well, I kind of gave my first one away a little bit earlier in the show. Scott Dixon, 17 times in 18 years that he's finished in the top 4 in the point standings, locking that up. Remarkable run of success for him. Remarkable run of success for Alex Palou, obviously the first driver since Dan Weldon in 2005, tracing it back to the IRL history. I know Sebastian Bourdais did so in 2007 in Champ Car as well, but clinching the championship before the final race is a rarity in American open wheel racing, and congratulations to Alex Palou on that. But I guess for the shining moment, Max Verstappen, Red Bull Racing, breaking records left and right this year, and Max in particular, 10 consecutive wins. I guess equaling Richard Petty from back in the 60s in the NASCAR Cup Series. And we think about how difficult that is, how impossible that is in a series like that. But in Formula One, Red Bull just nailed their car absolutely perfectly on all cylinders this year. They look like they might have a chance to do the unthinkable. And in there where we have more races than ever, still pull off the perfect season with Max Verstappen and Checo Perez. It's been absolutely sensational. So congratulations to them on a great year. Well on their way to clinching the drivers and constructors, respectively. and Max in particular, 10 in a row is just sensational.
Yeah, absolutely sensational. And I have two shining moments this week. First one, I'm going to give it to Chip Ganassi Racing, especially that number 10 team, Alex Palou. I know I brought this up yesterday, but doing what they did, this was also an emotional win and emotional championship victory as well, because as we saw over the weekend, Barry Wanzer, the Alex Palou's lead strategist, is battling cancer right now, had surgery. He's at the beginning of his recovery right now. Everyone hopes to see him back in 2024 on a timing stand. And I know when situations like this occur, when someone who's so close with the team is going through an incredibly tough personal battle, it kind of gives you an extra sense of motivation to try to finish the job that you started. And I really think Alex Palou and the entire number 10 team, all the Chip Ganassi Racing, they were motivated to lock up that championship and do it for Barry Wanzer. So and all the support that we've seen from the entire IndyCar paddock, from the team. I saw yesterday in Victory Lane, they were holding up, the Barry Wanzer's face, showing that he's still with us. They even put a championship hat on Barry Wanzer's face as well, which was a really kind gesture there. And certainly we wish Barry the best as he overcomes his battle with cancer here. And my second shining moment, since unfortunately I won't be able to catch the Encore show live tonight because I'm going on one day vacation because I'm very tired from all the work I've done this weekend. And so going to check out, I got to give a call to Miles Rowe for winning the USF Pro 2000 championship. That was a really special, historic moment. And you just think all the years we've had of racing, since the existence of racing, there's never been a black driver who's won an open wheel championship until this weekend. And for Miles Rowe to become the first one to do that, that's a very special moment for that young man. Thanks, sky's the limit to him. Looks like we're going to see him in Indy next in 2024, and who knows what happens after that. Maybe an IndyCar a year or so after that. And Miles Rowe continues to break barriers, continue to beat all the odds. And if you remember his story, if it wasn't for Will Power, Miles Rowe probably wouldn't be here today, because Will Power saw this kid. He saw something in him, thought he could be great, told Roger Penske, the Penske Entertainment Group, that you need to give this kid an opportunity to show what he could do. And we all know the struggles last year of all the funding that he had. Didn't know if he was going to be able to complete the full season. But when they didn't have sponsorship, Roger Penske was like, you know what? This kid is good. I'm just going to bet on him. I'm going to pay for the rest of his season. And it looks like Roger Penske's faith and belief in Miles Rowe has definitely paid off, because now he's a USF Pro 2000 champion and also the first black champion American Open Wheel Racing. I think that's a really special story. And last year, I believe it was late last year, Ben and I interviewed Miles Rowe on Life on the Grid. So if you haven't checked out the episode, we highly encourage you to do that and visit gridranking.com to look at all of our content from this race weekend at Portland. Got recaps of Indy Next, the BitNow.com Grand Prix of Portland, and we have a really great photo gallery up on the website thanks to Joe and all the help he had at PIR throughout the rest of the weekend. You guys got some really great shots that I'm sure all of our viewers will be happy to check out.
Yeah, Miles Rowe was also going to be my one shiny moment for this weekend. It's a historic moment for him to get that championship, and I'm so excited to see what he does in Indy next year, and also when he gets to IndyCar someday. I don't know what's going to happen. This is maybe speculation, but as you mentioned with Will Power, I think it'd be really cool if he took over the 12th car at Team Penske someday when Power decides to call it a career. I think that would just be a full circle moment. We'll see if that happens. We don't know. But yeah, Miles Rowe is my shiny moment as well.
We want to thank everyone for tuning in. I definitely got to say, if there was an additional shiny moment, definitely a big thank you to everyone that tuned in, watched, and of course our valuable Grid Network team. Show your support for the team. Invest in the Grid Network. We want to get everyone to the tracks. If you enjoyed coverage from Portland, we want to be at other races, send our team to events, invest in us. You can also do the super chat, buy me a coffee, and if you're watching this and we're not live on the air, there's a little thanks button where you can still contribute. So be sure to hit those icons. That will help us expand. And the easiest way to support us as well, subscribe and hit the icon. Don't miss any of our coverage, especially throughout 2024 and what is expected to be a very exciting year for all of us here at the Grid Network. For Kobe, Alex, and Ben, I'm Joe. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time for Grid Encore later today. And be sure to tune into Grid tonight. And then we'll do this all over again next weekend. Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.